There's a chairlift on the stairs, and it's been there for 10 years.
Welcome to the Jessica Jordan podcast.
Grandparents, bad health.
Today,
super enthusiastic, man.
I gotta channel it. Okay. This is me being excited about sharing things. I have this idea, though, that when I introduce it, I already know that I'm going to be delving into like deep things, and I may or may not be excited. I feel like at the times that I plan to record them, I'm not going to be like chipper. So, well, I want to be calm, but not engaging. A downer. I mean, I want to be engaging, yes, but not. It's kind of like I tell Shiloh. All right, we're going to take our deep breaths. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
That's it.
The beginning.
Welcome to Jessica Jordan's ASMR podcast.
It's not a bad way to start, though. All right, let's take a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. Welcome. I'm Jessica Jordan.
I'm nobody that anybody cares about. I'm your husband, Gabriel Jordan.
That's right.
And I'm just here to kind of interview you to get this whole podcast thing rolling.
That's right. It is difficult to interview yourself.
It is. I mean, you can monologue, but...
Objectively.
Yeah. Yep.
It's difficult.
So, but yeah, our goal is just to tell people about your new EP coming out. It's on its way. The first single's already available.
Yes.
And we're going to go through each track, tell a little bit of the backstory, what was going on, whether it's about you, whether it's about your son, whether about who it's about, what it's about. So that's the goal here.
Yes.
And we'll keep them brief, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes if you want to go deep. I don't think you're going to want to, but we'll see.
We'll see.
And so get people excited about your new music. That work?
Yes, that works.
Okay. All right. So let's start off with the one that has already been released. People can go listen to it now.
Yes.
Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, all the places.
All the places.
All the places I didn't mention, it's there too, probably.
Probably.
Yeah. So it is called...
The Chairlift.
The Chairlift.
Which should strike in your head a vision of a mechanical device that is attached to a staircase that has a chair, and it is for people that have lost their mobility and require assistance getting up and down stairs. Yeah.
It was not one of those things I was aware of its existence before my parents got one for my grandmother. But I think there was a commercial like a year or two ago. Like, I don't know. I feel like it was some insurance commercial where one was prominently featured. So I feel like people can picture it now. But yeah, it's a chair that rides up the staircase.
Yes, on a track that has to be installed.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like an elevator for your home.
Yes.
But just one person at a time.
Right. And then instead of going straight up, you're just following the line of the stairs.
So why did you write a song about a chairlift?
Well, that was not my intention. That night that I wrote The Chairlift, I didn't write a song. I was overwhelmed and overstimulated by life, by our children. At the time, we had 3.
Did we already have 3 at that point?
It was February.
Okay.
So it was when I was very dark in some postpartum anxiety and depression.
You had it rough.
I had very rough after a 3rd child.
Yeah.
And so that would have been the beginning of 2018. So 2 years ago at this point.
So, yeah.
And
so we would have had a little one at that point.
Right. And that was just over a year after losing your grandfather.
Okay.
And he was the most recent person to require use of the chairlift.
Said chairlift, yes.
And we had gone to your parents' house, at which this chairlift is prominently featured.
We go there once to twice a week.
Exactly. So this was a regular visit.
Right.
And your parents had actually needed to leave to go to the store for something. So we were just hanging out at their house with all our kids
Okay.
and all of our chaos. And we were just kind of waiting. And you could tell I was done. And so I left the room where you were.
Husband's intuition.
Right. You kept all 3 kids, including at this point the 3-month-old child.
Yep.
And
so we would have had about a 2.5-year-old and a almost 5-year-old.
he was 5.
He was 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was 5.
But he had just turned 5.
Right,
It was
he
October.
just turned 5.
Okay.
Right. So I went into the dining room, which is right beside the stairwell, and I had I didn't actually have my journal with me. I had a pad of paper, and I had my ukulele with me for some reason.
You already had a uke at this point?
I did.
Oh.
Because I got it.
Time goes weird in my brain, apparently. I thought the ukulele was...
No, but see, I
2
played
years
the
ago,
ukulele
maybe.
when I was pregnant with Shiloh.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
anyway.
Why is time weird?
I don't know, but I had the ukulele with me for some reason, and I was holding it and just trying to strum. I was trying to calm myself, so I just started strumming, and I thought, maybe I need to write because I haven't written today, so I'll write about the things that I'm looking at. And so the phrase, "There's the chairlift on the stairs," popped into my head because I was staring at it, and I started strumming, and then the next phrase, and it's been there for 10 years, and I was just kind of guessing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually know how long it had been installed because I know that
Probably
they
pretty
installed
close.
it when your grandmother had come to live with them.
Right.
And I know that I never met her. She had passed before we started dating. But I thought about how, they'd gotten it for her and she had used it and then she had passed. And then, years later, your grandfather came to live there for the same purpose and he had used it and then he had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just kind of mulling over, well, what's the purpose of it now? Well, I guess now it's for your parents, and thinking about how just less than a decade ago, we were young 20-somethings who didn't even know each other yet. And then, we didn't know about married life or family life. And now, less than a decade later, here we are with 3 kids. And we didn't know how hard life was going to be. And we didn't know about losing grandparents. And then it makes us think about losing parents and just the stages of life that you go through.
Right.
So that was definitely kind of mulling in my head. But I was still in the zone of I am frustrated, I'm overwhelmed, I've got too much going on, and the anxiety in me definitely lends itself to scary visions in my head of everyone being hurt or dying in some kind of way.
Right.
So I was trying not to focus on death, but at the same time I was like, well, death is a reality. It's just all around me. I'm looking at a chairlift and I'm thinking about, those who have already gone before us. So when I started writing on this pad of paper, it's what I call stream of consciousness style.
I was gonna say, it's a very stream of conscious song.
Yeah, it's because it's not a song. It was just, I am very overwhelmed and I just need to flush some thoughts out. Whatever comes into my head, I need to write it. So, the first verse says, "There's a chairlift on the stairs and it's been there for 10 years. Through your grandparents' bad health, now it's for your mom and dad." And then I was thinking of the lighter side of things, like how we play the compassion game. Like if you're in a moment of intense feelings that are negative, try to find some levity in there. And I was thinking, well, it really sucks. The grandparents are gone, but at least they paid off the house, So that was what went through my head.
Right side.
Right. So the next part of that stanzas, but they paid off the house before grandfather passed. He offered them his help. They'd do the same for us. And I remember that because they thought they could pay off the house, which they didn't anticipate doing. I don't know when you first
quite as quickly. Yeah.
Right. But because your grandfather gave them, some financial assistance, they were able to make it happen.
Yep.
And I think around the same time we were trying to get debt free. And so it was like, oh man, how cool would that be? Or was that after we got debt free?
If it was that long ago or that short ago, we were already in this house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So we were debt free for a couple years by then.
That's true.
Time's weird.
Time is so weird. So yeah, I was thinking about what a blessing it is to, even though you have lost somebody and suddenly you've got weird expenses, you know, you have to pay for their funeral and you have to pay for, transporting their, you know, remains across state lines and what that looks like. And it's a lot of expenses. And then trying to like redo a room so that you feel like you can use it without constantly being reminded of the pain, or, you know, just repurposing a place so it doesn't go unused. There's a lot of cost involved. And so my brain immediately went, but at least they paid off the house. But if, you know, then I thought if we were in that position, your parents would do the same for us. You know,
Right.
if they could help us in that way, they would certainly help us.
True.
And, my brain just kept going. And I was thinking about while we were there, like I probably could hear them, playing and fighting in the other room.
The kids, yeah.
Despite your attempts to like separate us and keep us
I don't
quiet.
know what you're talking about. 3 boys, they're never fighting. 10 minutes goes fast.
10 minutes does go fast. But they were in the other room fighting or something, playing, and I could hear. No, I know what it is. I'm pretty sure I heard them dump out the toy chest, which is the sound. The moment you hear like, there's toys everywhere, and then there's going to be a fight later about picking it up because nobody wants to do that. And so the next stanza was,
every time
we're over here, the kids make such a mess, but Granny knows they'll clean. She knows they're good for it. Which, I mean, it was a hopeful lyric, a hopeful line. Like,
we make sure they're good for it.
Right, exactly.
They whine and gnash teeth, but
I don't want my mother-in-law to think that I'm a lazy lout who doesn't make her children clean. But yeah, it's the moment I hear the toy chest getting dumped out, it's like, well, now we have to stay on them and be good parents and follow through. It's more work, but we did it. And so each of the stanzas that I did when I wrote them as stream of consciousness, I wasn't planning to make it into a melody of any sort.
True.
So that's why each line at the end is kind of repeated 2 or 3 times. They do the same for us. They do the same for us. And then she knows they're good for it. They're good for it. And at this point, I have sat down to write in earnest at the dining room table. I'm no longer standing with the ukulele in front of the staircase. I'm sitting at the dining room table.
which is just a few feet away.
It's just a few feet. And I hear a creak and I look up, and our oldest, Asher, had sneaked around out of the room, and he was standing in front of the stairwell. And he's got a little blanket in his hand because he...
At that point, he always had a blanket in hand.
Yeah. Up until he started kindergarten, he was like Linus. He carried his blanket everywhere, and he sucked his thumb with the other hand.
Yep.
So it's like blanket in one hand, thumb up against the mouth with the other. And I looked up at him, and I thought, I just asked for some time alone. That's all I wanted. I just wanted some time alone. But here he is watching me. But I've already acknowledged in my head how life passes so quickly.
Well, and at this point, we had signed him up for school.
Right.
And he was looking at kindergarten within another 6 or 7 months.
Yes.
And your heart was to homeschool him, but you weren't quite ready there with the other 2 youngins.
No. So I was acknowledging like that he's getting older and I'm going to lose him, but I just need a break right now. It was just all this like storm cloud of emotions, just kind of like pounding my head. So I looked up and I saw he watches while I write in front of the chairlift with a blanket in his hand and his left thumb in his mouth. The funny thing is, when he has heard this, he swears to me he always sucked his right thumb. But
he didn't discriminate. He didn't care.
Right. But I remember looking at him, and it was his left thumb in his mouth, and it was his other hand holding the blanket.
You literally documented it.
I documented it, but whatever, child. You do know which thumb you sucked. That's fine. And then I have the line that says, he can't leave me alone when I ask him to, but someday he'll stay away when I just want him home. And so just acknowledging that once he enters a new stage of life, I'm going to enter a new stage of life where I no longer wish my kids would just give me alone time. I start wishing my kids would just come over. And at this point, they're living their own lives. And, you know, whether or not they have families, they've got things to do. So
Sure.
they can't just drop everything and come be with me. But at this point, as I'm writing, I'm starting to get a little emotional, and I was like, oh no, like look somewhere else, look somewhere else. And so I start looking at the table, and on the table, there's this little wooden block, and it's something that you could just pick up at a Home Goods or Hobby Lobby, some kind of store that sells interior
The Chip
decor.
and Joe section of Target.
Yes.
Maybe.
Right.
Something like
hand
that.
and hearth.
Yeah.
But it's just a little wooden block, and on it is painted, "Thank you for the food before us, for the friends beside us, for the love between us." And so that wasn't even really a line. I just kind of like made a side margin note
Oh, really?
that like the kitsch decor says, like, and then I was like, I mean, if this turns into a song, I might use it. I don't know. So, that was basically it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to play through the song in my head and see if I've, I mean, I liked that. I liked that the little kitschy piece of decor, and I say that lovingly.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not like I didn't dislike it. I didn't know how to describe it on paper without drawing it. And so in my head, it was like mental note, kitsch decor. This is what it says.
Right.
And that was it. At that point, I was trying to get back into open mics in earnest, and it was not often that I had like regular new songs.
Right.
And so anytime I wrote something remotely creative, I was determined to try to work it into an open mic to just keep that practice open.
Right.
And so I think I had been listening to an Ingrid Michaelson album, and there's a song on her album called Her. And it has the phrase, I remember her. And you can tell that it's about a family member or loved one that she's lost.
Okay.
And she's just describing different parts of the house and the season and remembering, spending time with that person. And so because that it was in my head, I think it heavily influenced the melody that I chose and just the cadence. Although hers is much more like mellow and mournful in a way with the piano. And I did not intend for the song to take a soulful and upbeat direction.
Yeah, that was the producer who really had that vision for this one. You did not perform it that way.
I did not. It was just me and my ukulele.
Sure.
So when I tried it out at open mic, I thought, well, this is going to fall flat. But, just get it out of your system.
Right.
Share this weird
Just
thing.
stream of conscious whatever's on this paper.
I remember playing it at Berkeley first and kind of apologizing beforehand. Like, I don't know how this is going to go. This is just weird. And people clapped, but they're nice. And then I played it at Emerge, and somebody came up to me and they're like, how did you write that? I was like, I don't know what you're asking. I don't know. So anyway, all of that to say, it was me trying to process like all of the stages of life that I was kind of reeling with in February of 2018. And then it just kind of materialized into a song.
But that last point about the open mics, that was what was so interesting about this song to at least me, and I think you too, is that it's a weird song. Like it jumps subject to subject. There's not really any direct through line through any of it. It is just that stream of consciousness. And so when you played it for me, I was like, yay, good job. You wrote something, but it's weird.
Keep going.
But every time you played it at an open mic, you said somebody would walk up to you and be like, that's amazing. And it affected them in some way.
Yeah.
And so you kept having that reaction over and over and over. Like, you eventually did a couple of, more or less gigs of yourself that we had to create a set list for. And every time I would be like, why are you playing that weird one? And you're like, because every time I get a great reaction out of it. Somebody is really affected by it.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's got a powerful message, to people. I think they can read their own story into it, and relate to some part of it. If not every stanza, there's at least one or two that they really, they can feel coming through you.
Yep.
And that led to a bit of a partnership with an organization. You want to speak to that?
Yes. So during the year 2019, it's been about a year since I wrote the song and shared the song, and it's become, a regular part of my set list when I play longer gigs. And I made a friend at open mic named Charles Adair, and he told me that he was trying to start a nonprofit that couples creativity and artistic endeavors with kind of hot topics that you want to draw attention to. And so he said he wanted to call it Empathy Through Art, where artists of all genres are calling attention to one specific social issue going on. And so the first issue he wanted to tackle in the year 2019 was dementia and Alzheimer's. And it had a very close place to his heart because he lost his grandfather to Alzheimer's, and he helped care for him in some of his later stages. And it was very painful for him to be caring for someone he loves so much and for them to, forget who he was.
Right.
And when he talked about that story, it really spoke to me because one of my grandmothers at the time was in declining health, and she was experiencing dementia, where she couldn't quite remember who I was. Certainly didn't really know who my kids were. And you also got to experience that with your grandfather's wife. I don't know if you call her your grandmother, because she married later in.
Yeah. Through my entire childhood, she was married to him, so she was pretty much granny to me. Some of the family just call her Caroline, but huge, big personality. Really took over a room when she walked in, and then Alzheimer's started taking her, and it was definitely sad to watch that change.
Yeah. And I didn't get to see the change. I saw the after effects, where we would go to your parents' house and there would be so many calls on the telephone.
Because she was over in Texas. We're in North Carolina.
Yes.
And so she's trying to call my grandfather living at my parents' house. And like you said, she's calling constantly, but not saying anything really.
Yeah, doesn't even remember that she's calling probably. And at first she would say the same 3 phrases over and over again. And then it would kind of go down to like one phrase. And eventually when she called, she wouldn't say anything. She would just be on the phone.
Right.
So kind of experiencing that in real time, that was my experience with dementia and Alzheimer's. So when Charles kind of told his story and played a song about it and told me about empathy through art, he was going to have an event at the Artist Cafe Emerge that we have open mic at. And he asked me to be involved because he had heard the Chairlift. And at some point during 2019, we lost Caroline. And we also lost my grandmother that was having issues with dementia. And so it really hit home, and so instead of just kind of playing it because it's a song that people like to hear, I was playing it because, it's just taking me back to a place of remembering our grandparents and honoring them as we enter each new stage of life. So when I played it at the first Empathy Through Art event, it was nice to share in that with other people and have them connect, lyrically, specifically coupling it with the issue of Alzheimer's and dementia. But later, when I decided to have the Kickstarter campaign to further record and share the music, Charles pitched the idea that what if Empathy Through Art helped make that happen by sponsoring the song specifically with the Kickstarter
He had approached you even before the Kickstarter, saying that he wanted to be involved in monetarily producing this song.
Right. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's great. But actually, I want to do more than one song. And so then, after the Kickstarter campaign was successful, it was like, oh, wow, we can do this, but definitely want to keep the Chairlift at the forefront as sponsored by Empathy Through Art, because without that kind of partnership at the beginning of 2019 and on through, I don't think it would have had the same story or effect that it now does.
So where can people find out more about Empathy Through Art? Do you remember?
Yes, it is create-empathy.org.
Cool. So that is the first track that is from the EP. It is out now for everybody to listen to. And the EP will come at a future date, but this one you can listen to right here and now.
Mm-hmm.
So go out and stream it on your favorite platform. The Chairlift by Jessica Jordan. What's the EP going to be called when it does release?
The EP is called The Love Between Us, which is taken from a line in the Chairlift at the very end.
Seems appropriate.
From the kitsch decor. And that is thanks to the creative genius of my husband.
Oh, yes. So genius. Cool, Jessica. Thank you for telling us about it.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. And we'll be back for more.
Thank you.